Hello, world history students. I am here with a test review video. All right, so I am going to try to go through some of the highlights that you are going to need for your test, your very first test, test number 1, which is going to cover mostly chapters 3 and 4, but we'll have some key questions from chapters 1 and 2. Your bell works that you have been completing have completed a study guide. You should be able to use those to study. Your vocabulary, your historical figures list that was given to you today, and also this video, any notes that you took, and the videos that I linked. All of those things will help you review for your test. All right, here we go. So I'm letting you know right now, this review is not the entire test. I repeat, this is not the entire test. I will never hand you the entire test. Okay, this is not, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to hand you a study guide and then hand you a test that is the same questions. You have to actually learn the information. Okay, you should study your notes, past bell work questions, vocabulary, and important figures. Chapters 1 and 2 were already assessed using Unit 0 assessment, but there will be some questions on these chapters on this test. Okay, the bulk of the information will come from chapters 3 and 4. All right, so I'm going to go over some questions. These were originally made into a study guide. Some of them were on your bell work questions. Some of them are rephrased from the bell work questions, but either way, these are some important concepts. All right, so the first one, why did the Renaissance begin in Italy? Okay, if you go back to your chapter 1 notes, there was a heading that said, why Italy? It had 3 bullet points: thriving cities, city-states, independent trade cities. 2, a wealthy merchant class, again, making lots of money on trade. And the last one is the heritage of classical Greece and Rome. Rome, the city and the culture, was originally started in Italy, so they already had a lot of that past to build from. The next one, why was Italy a united country during the Renaissance? No, the Italy that we know did not exist until the late 1800s. Italy was a series of small kingdoms, and generally, most of it was a group of individual city-states. What killed about 60% of Europe's population in the 1300s? That would be the bubonic plague or the Black Death. That came from the fleas on the rats, from trade and from the Mongols coming from Asia. How do merchants affect the Renaissance? The merchants of the Renaissance spent a lot of money on the arts, which pushed the arts to move forward. There was more emphasis on individual achievement. They were competing against each other. They wanted to show off their wealth and status. That's the second one. Wealthy merchants began to use art as a way to display their wealth and status. And wealthy merchants were also patrons of the arts. Patron of the arts means that you support the arts, you pay a lot of money for the arts. What is a Renaissance man? The definition for that is someone who excels in many fields. And in that time period, it meant the classics, Greek and Roman writings, science, art, math, politics, combat, etc. And so the kind of epitome of that, the best example of that is Da Vinci. So what is Leonardo da Vinci famous for? He was a sculptor, inventor, writer, anatomist, engineer, astronomer, painter, and so many other things. He's the kind of definition of a Renaissance man. These are 2 of his most famous works, the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. But he was also an inventor. He made several attempts at flying machines, and he was an anatomist that worked on basic kind of medical skills. What do Asidorus Erasmus and Thomas More belong in? They are in the Christian humanists of Northern Europe, the people that took the ideas of humanism, grammar, rhetoric, logic, and things of that nature, and applied it to Christian beliefs and values. Which queen was very supportive of William Shakespeare? That would be Queen Elizabeth I of England. She is the second daughter of Henry VIII. She was a huge patron of the arts. She never married. You read an article about her. earlier this year. Okay, she had a very interesting life. We will also see her again in chapter 5. Which nations first invented printing? China and Korea actually invented the first printing, movable type printing as well. Since China invented paper, that should make a little bit of sense. Okay, now they're going to invent that around 1200, and then Europe is going to invent printing in the 1440s with Johann Gutenberg's movable type printing press. He is in the location that is currently Germany, and he was of German descent. But Germany, like Italy, did not exist in this time period. That government, that nation that we know, is not going to be created until the 1880s. All right, but Johann Gutenberg is going to invent the movable type printing press. Why does that matter so much? Because printing allows for quick, cheap book production, also production of shorter reading materials like newspapers and pamphlets. Okay, this increases literacy. It also helps new ideas to travel quickly, which is going to affect the Renaissance and Reformation era. Also, in the next time period, in chapters 5 and 6, it's going to help affect the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. Books bring people, this brings books to people that are not rich. It is going to open up books to people who normally could not afford them. Okay, this can also benefit people who cannot read or cannot afford books because other people can read to them. And that is still going to increase your educational level. Think about kindergarten, think about when you were a little kid and your parents read to you. It does help your brain develop, and it does help your knowledge develop, even if somebody else reads it to you. What event started the Protestant Reformation? In 1517, Martin Luther nailed a list of complaints against the Catholic Church on the church door. This is called the 95 Theses. It was published using the printing press and sent around, and eventually this is going to lead to his movement to fix the Catholic Church. However, it quickly turns into a break with the Catholic Church, and the first of the Protestant religions, Lutheranism, is created. All right, what were some of the complaints about the Catholic Church that started the Reformation? 1, popes seemed more concerned with luxury and political power, their wealth and status, than with spiritual matters. Okay, they were not being the best Christians they could be. They resented the fact that they paid taxes to support the church in Rome. People in this time period paid taxes to the government and separate taxes to the church. It was required, not voluntary. All right, the next one. Many local priests lacked education and couldn't teach people. Okay, that's one of the many functions of the church in that time period, and many of the smaller local town priests did not have what it took to make it happen. Also, others took actions that broke their vows as priests. They did not abstain from drinking or from having relationships and things that they are supposed to. And the last one, and one of the biggest ones of this time period, is the selling of indulgences. Okay, so an indulgence is something that you can do to earn forgiveness for a sin. In this case, they were allowing them to be bought. So somebody very wealthy would commit a sin. They would go to confess their sin to the Catholic priest, and the priest would allow them to pay for forgiveness. People thought that they could win salvation this way. Martin Luther is going to say that that is absolutely incorrect and is going to stop that. Now, even the Catholic Church today uses indulgences, but they are not allowed to be bought or sold. You must still earn it. Who started the Church of England or the Anglican Church? That would be Henry VIII of England. He was the King of England, and he disliked very much the power of the Pope over his nation and the Church's power, and he also wanted a divorce. This all started because he wanted to divorce his wife, who had birthed a daughter, when he wanted a son. When that happened, he tried to divorce her, and the Pope refused to allow it. Henry did not like being told no, and so he challenged the Pope and created his own church. Then he made it illegal not to be Anglican or not to follow the Church of England in England. All right, the next major break from the Catholic Church is from John Calvin. So, what is the major difference that John Calvin promoted in his church? The main difference is the belief in predestination. He taught that people are sinful by nature and only those that God chooses, the elect, will be saved, and that God knows from birth whether or not a person will be saved. Okay, he is all-knowing and he knows the future. He said that God knew from the beginning which people would be saved and which would not. A lot of people have a hard time with this. Another difference about John Calvin is that he also believed in simplistic worship. He said you don't need these big, huge churches with these great stained glass windows. You can worship in a field as long as you are worshiping. All right, who brought Calvinism to Scotland? That is a guy named John Knox, and he's going to create the Presbyterian Church. What are the Calvinist followers in France called? Those are Huguenots. I realize there's a T in there, but this is French, so they pronounce it Huguenot. All right, who are the Jesuits? The Jesuits are, their full name is the Society of Jesus, and they were formed as part of the Catholic Reformation or Counter-Reformation, in which the Catholic Church looked at Martin Luther's complaints and said, you know what, he might be right about a few of them, and they attempted to fix themselves. Okay, the Jesuits have a very strict obedience to the Pope. They were founded by a guy named Ignatius of Loyola, and they did extensive missionary work. This is going to become important because many of the Jesuits are going to make it to places such as the Americas and Asia to spread Catholicism. All right, why is the Council of Trent important? This is a meeting of the Catholic Church officials in 1545 that helped to reset some rules within the Catholic Church. So this is a list of the rules. All right, moving on to Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is about the gunpowder empires, the three Muslim gunpowder empires, the Ottoman, the Safavid, and the Mughal. Where did the Ottomans get their name? Usman. The Europeans just pronounced his name incorrectly. What new technology made the Ottomans successful? Gunpowder. That's why we call them the gunpowder empires. Okay, usually in cannons, but they do have some guns. So this is true about the Ottomans, the Safavid, and the Mughal. We call them gunpowder empires. How did Mehmed take the city of Constantinople? This is the crazy story about how he literally pulled they pulled their ships across the land and then put them in on the other side because there was a blockade. All right, so it was just completely overwhelming and just crazy, but it totally works. What happened to the Hagia Sophia? When the Ottomans took over the Byzantine Empire, they took the biggest Christian church at the time, the Hagia Sophia, and turned it into a mosque. Now later, that mosque in 1935 became a museum. And then in 2020, okay, just recently, was restated as a mosque. How are the Janissaries a unique group? So they are Christians taken as children and made into slaves with personal loyalty to the Sultan. They are trained soldiers. These are Christian slave soldiers. Most of them were converted to Islam and they were trained and educated. They were paid. This is not the slavery that we think of. There's lots of types of slavery throughout history. That's one of the things that I hope you'll learn in world history class, is that there is more than one way to do pretty much everything. There's lots of types of governments. There's lots of types of slavery. There's lots of types of ways to take advantage of other nations. There's lots of ways to make war. And we have done all of these things, some terrible and some efficient. Okay, the Janissaries are going to, some of them hold government jobs, some of them become advisors to the kings, the sultans. How does cultural blending take place? Cultural blending is when two cultures spend a lot of time together, and then their cultures start to mirror each other or start to blend. Okay, so this can happen due to trade, conquest, movement of people from one area to another, or conversion to a new religion. Anytime different peoples live together and their cultures influence one another, you experience cultural blending. This was brought up during this particular chapter because the Safavid Empire is a major example of cultural blending. What was the Safavid Empire in what was originally Persia, famous for trading? Persian rugs, carpets. What was the name of the first Muslim empire in India? The Delhi Sultanate. How did Akbar show his tolerance for other religions? Okay, Akbar is going to be one of the golden age rulers for the Mughal Empire in India. Okay, and because he is a Muslim ruler of India, where the majority of the population is Hindu, religious toleration would have been great. Now, he's one of the only ones that is going to be tolerant in this time period. Most people did not believe in religious freedom, okay, but he did. He let his wives practice whatever religion they chose. He had several of them, and they could be Hindu or Islamic or whatever they wanted. He also hired people based on their ability, not their religion. He hired both Hindus and Muslims to important government jobs. He also attempted to create a universal religion that blended the two, which did not work out because those two things are not compatible. What blended languages were spoken in India? Hindi, which is still a very important language in India, and Urdu, which is the official language of Pakistan. What famous landmark was built by Shah Jahan, and why did he build it? He built the Taj Mahal. You can see a picture of it there, and it was built as a tomb for his wife. It's a wonderfully romantic story about how he was head over heels in love with his wife, even though it was an arranged marriage, and I know that a lot of times people think that that's not possible, but he was. He loved her very much, and when she passed away, he became deeply depressed and was hardly able to run his country, and he spent most of his country's tax money to build this wonderful shrine to her of solid white marble. He meant to build a matching one for himself, but he was overthrown by his son, who said, look, you're not taking care of the country, I'm going to take care of it for you, and he put his dad on house arrest for the rest of his life. But we have this wonderful tribute to his wife that you can visit in India. It is a beautiful building, but it is also an example of cross-cultural interaction because this is a Muslim building, a Muslim tomb, mausoleum, in a majority Hindu nation. All right, moving on to chapter 3. All right, so chapter 3 is going to start our exploration. Make sure you go back and look at the maps and you know where the explorers went and what their major contributions were. All right, what were the 3 G's that Europeans were inspired by for exploration? God, glory, and gold. Okay, to create Christians, to spread the word. Glory is pretty self-explanatory. They wanted to make a name for themselves, and gold as well. They wanted to make a lot of money. What new technologies helped them? A new kind of ship called the Caraval, the magnetic compass, and the sextant, which is going to help them measure the horizon and some other things to help them navigate the ocean. What general area were the Europeans attempting or trying to get to? Okay, they were not trying to get to the Americas. They were trying to get to Asia. Okay, China, India, and the Spice Islands, of which is now like Indonesia. And that's where they were trying to get to. What did they want? Silk, spices, porcelain, tea. Okay, porcelain means China, which is what you drink tea out of, right? This is what they wanted, and that's why they wanted to get there. Which European nation began exploration? That would be Portugal, led by Henry the Navigator. And which direction did they attempt to get to Asia? They are going to try to go from Europe south around Africa and then to the east. Okay, is that possible? Absolutely. Did it take them a very long time? Also, yes. All right, which European nation came next? That would be Spain. And which direction did they choose to attempt? They chose to attempt to go west across the Atlantic Ocean and hope to get all the way around to the east. Since the earth is round, that would work. However, they do not know about the Americas. Okay, obviously this is where Columbus comes in. He heads out, he bumps into some islands, and he goes home and tells them that he made it to Asia, he made it to the islands. Obviously, we know now that he did not. Okay, he did not make it to Asia. Columbus mostly bounced around on the islands, but eventually Amerigo Vespucci is going to get here, and he's going to tell the Spanish that Columbus was incorrect, that it's not Asia, and that's why we're called America, after Amerigo Vespucci. Why did the Pope have to get involved in exploration, and what did he do? Spain and Portugal were arguing over which nation had the rights to the land that Columbus had claimed. Both countries were Catholic, so they looked to the Pope for guidance. And in 1494, they signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, which divided the world into two areas, one for Spain and one for Portugal. Okay, so Portugal is going to make a trading post empire along the coast of Africa, islands in the Pacific, along the coast of India. Okay, they're going to take small little ports. They're not going to take large areas of land except for Brazil. Now, Spain, on the other hand, is going to take everything in the Americas almost. It's very large amounts of territory instead of a trading post. So Spanish Empire is going to be created a land-based empire. Portugal is creating a trading post empire. What goods did the Europeans want to buy in Asia? Silk, porcelain, and spices, folding screens, folded fans, all kinds of luxury items. Go back and check that out in your PowerPoint. Which two nations came in during the 1600s and challenged Portugal and Spain? England and the Netherlands, okay, which are the Dutch. You'll also hear Holland. There's lots of names for it. I didn't name it. I apologize for that. Okay, but England and the Netherlands are going to join, and France is going to come in late. Okay, England, the Netherlands, and then the French. Who did Hong Wu have to defeat in order to create the Ming dynasty of China? He had to defeat the Mongols. He had to kick the Mongols out. What was the goal of Zheng He and his voyages? The goal was to impress other people with the power and wealth of China. He also wanted to convince others to pay tribute and send gifts to China in order to earn trade rights. Go back and check this out. Watch John Green's video on Zheng He. It's great stuff. Okay, he is going to travel from China to increase the prestige and the status of China. He is going to bring some things back, but he doesn't really increase trade. There was already so much trade happening. Okay, in the picture you see Zheng He, you see his many ships, and then you see a comparison of Zheng He's ship to Columbus's ship. And we have had a discussion in class about why on earth did the Chinese, that giant Chinese fleet with these amazing ships, not make it to the Americas first. It's all about motivation. The Chinese were not looking for a way to Europe. The Europeans were looking for a way to the Chinese. And so the Europeans are going to find the Americas, and the Chinese are not. The Chinese are actually going to begin isolating themselves after Zheng He's voyages. What did China attempt to do after stopping these voyages? China began to try to isolate itself, only allowed Europeans to trade officially at 3 ports, and later that is only down to 1 called Canton, and we call that the Canton system. What new dynasty was created when the Manchu defeated the Ming dynasty of China? The Qing dynasty. I realize that's a Q, but it's pronounced Qing. How were women treated in China? Women suffered in this period. Sons were valued over daughters. For that reason, many infant girls were killed, and adult women were given few rights. Also, they used foot binding, which you will see pictures of in your PowerPoint if you went back. It's a physically painful and socially controlling practice that was started many years earlier, but was still prevalent by this time period. We actually have color photos, so it was prevalent all the way through the 1800s. What type of system, similar to Europe, was important in Japan? Feudalism. Okay, it's all about the people on top sharing their power with the people below them, who share power with people below them, and the peasants do all the work. How did Tokugawa ensure that his nobles would not rebel? When Tokugawa united Japan and became the shogun, he required the nobles to live every other year in his capital and leave their families in the capital with him during the years when they were not there. Okay, so basically this is a very high-class, fancy version of a hostage situation. The nobles would build mansions in the capital, and their family would live in these really comfortable mansions, but they were within the king's grasp if they were to rebel. What was banned in Japan in 1612? That would be Christianity. When there were some Christian missionaries there, the Tokugawa thought they were being too pushy, and they banned Christianity in 1612. All right, chapter 4. So chapter 4 is going to be on once the Europeans get to the Americas, what happens. So obviously the death of Native Americans, the increase of African slavery, and the Columbian Exchange, which is a little bit less depressing. All right, what did a large portion of the Native American population die when the Europeans came? The Europeans brought diseases to which the native peoples had no resistance, such as measles, mumps, chickenpox, influenza, and smallpox, which killed them by the hundreds of thousands. Okay, obviously there was also a ton of violence as well, but the diseases are going to be the main factor. Which European nations conquered most of the Americas? Spain is number one. It's huge. Check the map out that I gave you on the PowerPoint. Okay, the second one, Portugal, okay, which is going to be Brazil, and then the French come in and are going to tie with them when they take Canada, and then the British and the Dutch start out with the smallest amount of territory, but later Britain's territory is going to grow due to a few wars. What crop was grown in the Americas that made the most money and required the most slaves? Now, if I asked you this in a discussion, most people are going to go with cotton or with tobacco, because here in our North American colonies, where we live in Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, it was tobacco or cotton. But overall, in the Americas, the biggest cash crop, the most labor intensive, which means it needs the most workers, and the most dangerous crop, and the most profitable crop, and all of these things is sugar, sugar cane, sugar, sugar, sugar. Why was there more racial mixing in the Spanish and Portuguese colonies than in the English or French? Because few Spanish settlers in the Americas were women. Spanish men had children with native women and some slaves. This created two mixed groups called mestizos, which is European and native blood, and mulattoes, who is European and African blood. Sometimes voluntary, sometimes not. You guys know the stories. The British brought their entire family, and the French rarely even lived in the colony. They just had some forts and some port areas. They did not build large cities, so they did not mix as much. What was the main way that France made money from their colony New France, which is going to be Canada down to Louisiana? Fur trade. Okay, usually beaver fur, because it's waterproof and warm. Now, they also own Haiti, and there's going to be sugar plantations there. But in New France, it's going to be all about fur trade. What was the first permanent settlement that the English established in North America? That would be Jamestown, Virginia. This is also what is featured in the movie Pocahontas. Which European country did England take New York from? Okay, that would be from the Netherlands. The Netherlands originally owned it. The colony was called New Netherlands, and the city of New York was called New Amsterdam, and it then became New York, New York. In which conflict did France lose their North American territories? The French and Indian War, which is also part of the 7 Years' War, which we will get back to in upcoming chapters. Okay, but this map shows you a major change from most of the United States being owned by Spain and France, and only a little bit of England, to England owning like half. Okay, but if you also look at these years here, 1763 is when that war ends, and our American Revolution is going to start in 1776, so we're backing right up to that. What major advantages did the Europeans have over the natives? Obviously, the disease is a factor, but the guns and cannons and horses and food and armor and all of those things are definitely going to help. Why did the Europeans turn to Africans as a source of slave labor? They tried to enslave the Native Americans. They did, but they were dying very quickly. Also, the Catholic Church started defending them. Africans had resistance to European diseases, so they would not get sick. They knew about farming, so they would be able to do the work. And Africans were strangers to the Americas, so they did not know where to hide, and they did not often run in the early years. Now, later, do slaves try to free themselves? Of course they do. They tried to rebel. They jumped off the ships. They did all kinds of stuff. They always resisted. They tried to fight back. But in most cases, they were not able to organize a large-scale rebellion. All right, describe the life of slaves on a plantation. Awful, right? Harsh, hot, miserable, not enough food, brutal punishment, overwork, terrible living conditions, terrible working conditions, terrible life. Describe the triangular trade system. There's a map of this on your PowerPoint. It links Europe, Africa, and the Americas. European ships brought manufactured products, things that they were making, to Africa, trading them for people. They carried the Africans across the Atlantic to the Americas, where they were sold into slavery. The traders then brought sugar, coffee, and tobacco back to Europe. What is the Columbian Exchange? This is a large-scale moving and mixing of people, cultures, plants, animals, and diseases. Okay, there's a map here. There are also several maps on your PowerPoint. There's a crash course video on YouTube and there's lots of these maps. There's lots of things that belong on one side of the ocean that are mixed now across the other side. This is an interesting map because it also includes things like rubber trees, which we're going to use obviously eventually to make tires, and it includes things like watermelon and dandelions, dandelions, which we think of as a weed. They did not come from the Americas, but now they're here. They're everywhere. All right, how did the Columbian Exchange change the world? It moved animals, plants, and people around the world. It changed the diet of humans and allowed for more ethnic diversity, and the diseases that were spread killed millions. Okay, this is going to change everything about what we eat, what we do, where we live, our racial mixtures, everything. List 5 foods native to Europe, Asia, or Africa, also known as the Old World. These are the places that they knew about. Bananas, black-eyed peas, yams, cattle, pigs, horses. Okay, lots of things. Lots of diseases, obviously, too. All right, list 5 foods native to the Americas. Potatoes, both regular and sweet potatoes. Tomatoes, squash, corn, vanilla, turkey, and pumpkins. Why is capitalism important? Capitalism is the economic system that we use here in the United States. And basically, the main idea is that private business is allowed and supply and demand regulate the market. What is measured to describe a nation's wealth under the system of mercantilism? This is huge because at the time it was only precious metals, gold and silver. So if you didn't have a lot, then your nation was not considered wealthy. Okay, and the Spanish, who just discovered the Americas and made these huge colonies, they had found a lot of silver. But they brought it home, they turned it into gold coins and gold bars, and then they wanted to spend it, right? That was the whole goal of all this, was to make money, is to spend money. And they wanted to spend it in Asia. So they were pumping all of the silver out of the Americas, bringing it home, and then spending it in Asia, and it was making Asia rich, and Europe wants to be rich, and this is going to be important in the next couple chapters. Okay, so mercantilism is all about precious metals. Where did Europeans spend most of the money they made in their American colonies? I just answered that. That is Asia, because that was the original goal of exploration, and we've gone all the way back into a full circle. They wanted to buy Asian goods. All right, I know that was a long video, but it went over many, many, many things that you will need for your test. So good luck on your test tomorrow, and thanks for watching.